Have you ever stood on a doorstep and felt the world shift under your feet? Not just the ground, but the very idea of it. The idea of home, of safety, of the America you're told you live in. Jamal Henderson knew that feeling. He'd felt it in the bone-dry dust of a foreign country, under a sun that baked the lies right into your skin. And he was about to feel it again on a manicured lawn in suburban Ohio, where the grass was too green and the silence was too loud. Before go deeper into the story, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because we're telling real stories that reveal the truth behind the headlines. Drop a comment to let us know the country or city you're watching from. The Amazon van hummed behind him, a blue and gray beast of burden in a street of beige houses and identical mailboxes. He checked the address on the scanner, then the one on the door. 1,412. He was at 1,414, a simple mistake. He turned to leave, package in hand, when the door creaked open. A man stood there, Greg Masterson, his face a mask of curdled privilege. He wasn't old, maybe 50, with a soft belly straining against a polo shirt and the kind of eyes that had never known doubt. "Can I help you?" The question wasn't an offer. It was a challenge. Jamal held up the box. "Sorry, sir. Wrong address. This is for next door." He gave a small professional nod and began to turn away. That should have been it, but it wasn't. Greg stepped onto the porch, blocking the path. "You people can't even read numbers." The words hung in the humid air, thick and ugly. Jamal stopped. His back was to the man, but he could feel the venom. He turned slowly, his face a study in forced neutrality. The Marine in him, the part they couldn't strip away with a piece of paper, stood at attention. "It was a mistake, sir." A woman, Linda, appeared behind Greg, her face pinched with the same sour disapproval. She clutched a floral robe at her throat. "What is it, Greg? Who is this?" Greg smirked, a cruel twist of his lips. "Just another one who can't follow simple instructions. Probably looking to see what he can steal." Jamal's hands, calloused from years of holding a rifle, and now from gripping a steering wheel for 10 hours a day, tightened into fists at his sides. He forced them open. "There's no need for that. I'm just doing my job." Greg took another step forward, his chest puffed out. "Your job? You come onto my property, uninvited, and you expect me to what? Thank you? We know your kind. You get one of your friends to come back later. We have a doorbell camera, you know." Jamal just stared. He saw the boss's face then, superimposed over Greg's. The same entitled sneer. The same assumption of power. The same casual cruelty. "I'm leaving now," Jamal said, his voice low, a gravelly rumble of restraint. But Greg wasn't done. He was enjoying this. "You better run back to whatever hole you crawled out of. You hear me, boy?" Linda, emboldened, chimed in. "This neighborhood has standards, you know." The poison was out now, flowing freely. And then Greg delivered the blow he'd been holding back, the one he saved for moments like this, when he felt powerful. "We see you people on the news, thugs. Get the hell off my property before I get my rope and hang you from that oak tree myself, you fucking nigger." The word hit Jamal not like a punch, but like a pressure wave. It sucked the air from his lungs, silenced the birds in the trees, and made the perfect green lawn look like a killing field The world didn't just shift. It cracked wide open. This is where a story is supposed to pivot. This is where the hero is supposed to reveal himself. But Jamal Henderson wasn't a hero anymore. The United States Marine Corps had made sure of that. The narrator in his head, the voice that never left him, started its litany of failure. You are Sergeant Henderson, Jamal, decorated for valor under fire. You are the man who pulled 2 wounded brothers out of a burning Humvee while insurgents laid down suppressive fire. You are the man who believed in the code. Semper Fidelis, always faithful. And then you are the man who stood before Major Davies, a man whose family money bought his rank, in a prefabricated command tent that smelled of diesel and fear. Davies, pointing at a map of a small village. The target is in there. We have intel. But we can't risk them slipping away. I want that village sanitized. No witnesses. You understand me, Sergeant? Jamal had understood perfectly. He saw the faces of the children who'd kicked a dusty soccer ball near the wire just yesterday. He saw the old woman who offered his squad flatbread. Sir, Jamal had said, his voice respectful but firm. That's a civilian area. The rules of engagement. Davies had cut him off, his eyes cold. The rules of engagement are what I say they are. This is a direct order. Jamal stood his ground. I can't do that, sir. I won't. That was the end, not of the war, but of his war, of his life. Davies didn't get his sanitized village, but he got his scapegoat. Jamal was charged with insubordination, dereliction of duty. They made it stick, a dishonorable discharge. They took his rifle, his rank, his pride, and the future he thought he'd earned. They stripped him of everything but the memories and the tattoo on his forearm that now felt like a brand of shame. He got back in the Amazon van, the ghost of Greg Masterson's hatred clinging to him like grave dirt. He slammed the door, the sound echoing in the too quiet street. He looked at his own reflection in the rearview mirror, sunken eyes, a jaw tight with a rage that had no place to go. He wasn't Sergeant Henderson anymore. He was just a guy in a blue vest, a target in a country that had trained him to die for its flag, only to discard him on its manicured lawns. The engine turned over with a weary groan. He had 112 stops left. He drove for 3 blocks, the box for 1,412, sitting on the passenger seat like an accusation. The GPS chirped at him to make a U-turn. Turn left. You have arrived. But he hadn't arrived. He was adrift. He thought of the flight home from Afghanistan, the heavy silence of the transport plane filled with ghosts. He had pictured Sarah waiting for him, her smile the one thing that could anchor him. He'd rehearsed what he would say, how he would explain the mess of the discharge, how they would fight it together. He'd walked into their small apartment, the one they'd saved for with his combat pay, and found it hollowed out, not just empty of furniture, but empty of life. The note was on the kitchen counter, weighted down by her wedding ring. Jamal, I heard what happened. I just can't do this. I'm with Mark now. He's stable. He's here. I'm sorry. Mark, his high school buddy. The one who was supposed to be checking on her. The betrayal was so complete, so total. It was almost elegant in its cruelty. His country, his wife, his friend, all gone. He'd sat on the floor of that empty apartment for 2 days, the dishonorable discharge papers in one hand and her letter in the other, 2 documents testifying to the fact that he no longer existed. In a forgotten corner, he found the box, the one with his medals, the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism, the Purple Heart. They felt like cheap tin, props from a play about a man he no longer knew. He shoved the box into a closet and never opened it again. Surviving meant forgetting. Surviving meant putting one foot in front of the other. It meant selling his car to make rent. It meant taking the first job that would have him, the one that didn't care about a DD 214 form, as long as you could lift 50 pounds and piss clean. So he became a ghost in a blue van, haunting the same suburban streets day after day, delivering the curated happiness of strangers. He was good at it, efficient, invisible, and that was the point. To be invisible, to not be seen, because being seen meant being judged. Being seen meant having to answer for the man you used to be. But Greg Masterson had seen him. And in that moment, Jamal Henderson realized that invisibility was no longer an option. It was a cage. He pulled the van over to the curb, the engine idling, the air conditioner blasting cold air that did nothing to cool the fire in his gut. He stared at the tidy houses, the perfect lawns, the illusion of peace. He had been silent for too long. He had swallowed the Major's lies. He had swallowed his wife's betrayal. He had swallowed the daily indignities of a world that saw his black skin before it saw anything else. He would not swallow this. He would not choke on Greg Masterson's hate. For the first time in over a year, a flicker of the old sergeant ignited inside him. A leader of Marines does not retreat. A leader of Marines confronts the enemy. And this was the enemy. Not a man with a gun in a faraway land, but a man with a polo shirt and a mortgage, his heart filled with an ancient, homegrown poison. This was the fight he'd been brought home to. He just hadn't realized it until now. His fingers, which had been trembling with rage, grew steady. He pulled out his phone. The screen was cracked, but it worked. He didn't look for the Amazon support line. He knew what they would say. Apologize. De-escalate. The customer is always right. He bypassed them entirely. He typed Oakwood Hills Police Department into the search bar. A number appeared. He pressed it. The dispatcher's voice was bored, automated. Oakwood Hills Police, what's your emergency? Jamal took a deep breath. I'd like to report a threat. A hate crime. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy with skepticism. The narrator in his head whispered a warning. You're asking the system that broke you to fix you. You're asking the men who wear one kind of blue uniform to believe you over the man who pays their salary with his property taxes. What makes you think this time will be any different? Jamal ignored the voice. It had to be different. He wouldn't allow it to be the same. He was no longer running. He was Sergeant Jamal Henderson. And he was filing a report. He had a new mission. The police station smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant, a scent that tried and failed to cover up the lingering odor of human desperation. The desk sergeant, a man whose gut spilled over his duty belt, looked at Jamal with an expression of profound weariness. He listened with half an ear as Jamal recounted the incident, his pen hovering over a form, not moving. So, let me get this straight, the sergeant said, finally looking up. He called you a name. A bad name, I'll grant you. And he said something about a rope? Jamal nodded, his jaw set. He threatened to hang me from his tree. And he used a racial slur. The sergeant sighed, leaning back in his squeaky chair. Look, man, people say stupid stuff when they're pissed. It's words. Unpleasant words, sure, but it's a he said situation. Without proof, there's not much we can do. It's not illegal to be an asshole. The dismissal was so casual, so expected, it was almost more insulting than Greg's overt hatred. This was the system in action. Apathy as a weapon. As Jamal stood there, the familiar tide of hopelessness washing over him, a side door opened. A woman in a detective's plain clothes walked out, holding a file. Detective Maria Reyes. She was in her late 30s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She had overheard the entire exchange. She looked from the dismissive sergeant to Jamal, and she saw him. Really saw him. She saw the rigid military posture beneath the blue Amazon vest. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes, but also a core of unyielding steel. She had seen that look before, in her father, a Vietnam vet who fought battles in his own head long after the war was over. As a Latina on the force, she knew the subtle cuts of prejudice, the assumptions, the low-key contempt. She felt a knot of recognition tighten in her stomach. "I'll take the report, Frank," she said to the sergeant, her voice quiet but firm. The sergeant shrugged, relieved to be rid of the paperwork. Reyes led Jamal to a small, cluttered desk. She didn't offer false sympathy. She just listened. She took down every detail, every word, every nuance. When he was done, she looked him in the eye. "I can't promise you what will happen, Mr. Henderson. The sergeant is right about one thing: these cases are hard to prove." "He said he had a doorbell camera," Jamal said, his voice flat. Rhea's eyes flickered with interest. "He did. He was proud of it," Jamal said. "Threatened me with it." Reyes made a note. A real one. She wasn't just going through the motions. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I'll look into it." It wasn't a promise of justice, but it wasn't a dismissal either. It was a crack of light in a dark room. For now, it was enough. Detective Reyes couldn't shake the image of Jamal Henderson's face. It wasn't the anger that stuck with her. It was the profound dignity in the face of abject humiliation. It reminded her of her grandfather being called a spick while trying to buy groceries in a new town. So, she did more than just file the report in a cabinet to gather dust. She did a little digging. That afternoon, she took an unmarked car and drove down the idyllic, tree-lined street where the Mastersons lived, 1414 Maple Drive. The house was immaculate. A perfectly edged lawn, blooming rose bushes, and a large American flag hanging from a pole on the porch, flapping lazily in the breeze. A sign near the walkway read, "In this house we believe," followed by a checklist of progressive platitudes. Black Lives Matter. Love is love. Science is real. It was a shield. A perfect piece of suburban camouflage. Reyes parked down the street and ran their names through the system. Greg and Linda Masterson. No criminal records. Not even a speeding ticket. On paper, they were model citizens. But experience had taught her that the cleanest records sometimes hid the deepest filth. She pulled up their social media profiles. Linda's was locked down tighter than Fort Knox. Private. But Greg's was public. His profile picture was of him and Linda, on a boat, smiling, tanned, the picture of American prosperity. His feed was a curated stream of plausible deniability. No overt slurs, nothing a lawyer could easily nail him on. But the pattern was there, clear as day to anyone willing to look. Posts mocking social justice movements, shared articles from far-right blogs about the invasion at the southern border, comments laced with phrases like thug culture and forced diversity. He loved pictures of police officers and soldiers, but his comments revealed he only loved the ones who looked like him. It was the language of modern American racism sanitized for public consumption, but boiling with the same old hate. Reyes felt a familiar coldness seep into her bones. This was the enemy that was so hard to fight. Not the cartoon villain in a white hood, but the neighbor with the perfect lawn and the poisoned heart, the one who smiled at you in the grocery store while despising your very existence. She looked back at the house, at the flag, at the sign proclaiming love and acceptance. It was all a lie. And deep down, she knew that doorbell camera held the truth. Jamal went back to his route, but the day was fractured. Every door he knocked on, he half expected Greg Masterson to answer. The rhythm of his job, the one thing that had kept his mind numb and his body moving, was gone. That night, in his stark, lonely apartment, the silence was deafening. He couldn't sit still. He couldn't watch TV. The rage and helplessness were a toxic cocktail churning in his stomach. He needed to do something more than file a police report that would likely go nowhere. He needed to speak. He opened his laptop and logged into a forum he hadn't visited in months, Vets Forward. It was a closed group for veterans, a digital foxhole where soldiers could talk about the things they couldn't say to civilians. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. He started typing, the words pouring out of him, raw and unfiltered. He wrote about the sun and the dust and the major's command. He wrote about the dishonorable discharge and the shame that was like a constant low-grade fever. He wrote about coming home to an empty house. And then he wrote about today, about the green lawn, the polo shirt, and the N-word. He wrote about the threat, the casual way the man had invoked the most terrifying symbol of racial violence in American history. He didn't use the Mastersons' names or address. He didn't need to. This wasn't about doxing someone. It was about testifying. "I've been shot at," he wrote. "I've seen friends die, but I have never felt more under attack than I did on that porch today. I wore the uniform. I bled for that flag, and I was told I should be hung from a tree like a piece of strange fruit because I delivered a package to the wrong door. When does it end? Where are we safe?" He hit post and leaned back, his chest heaving. He expected maybe a few comments of support. What happened was an avalanche. The post exploded. Hundreds of comments poured in within the hour. Veterans of all colors, from all branches, shared their own stories. A black Air Force tech sergeant who was called a diversity hire by his commander. A Latino Marine who was told to go back to Mexico at a VFW hall. A white infantryman who was horrified by the racism he saw within his own unit. They saw Jamal's story and recognized its brutal truth. It wasn't an isolated incident. It was a symptom of the same disease. The messages of support were overwhelming. "We see you, brother. We stand with you, Sergeant. You are not alone." For the first time since he'd been handed that discharge, Jamal didn't feel discarded. He felt seen. He felt heard. He wasn't just a driver. He wasn't just a disgrace. He was one of them. The brotherhood he thought he had lost was right here, in the glowing text on a computer screen. Detective Reyes used Jamal's report and the supplementary evidence from Greg Masterson's social media profile to argue for a warrant. Her captain was skeptical, but the specific, violent threat, the mention of a rope and hanging, was just enough to cross the legal threshold for a terroristic threat investigation. A judge signed off on it. The next morning, Reyes and her partner, a stoic veteran officer named Detective Miller, arrived at 1414 Maple Drive. They didn't come with sirens, just a quiet, determined presence. Greg Masterson answered the door, a cup of coffee in his hand. When he saw the uniforms and the warrant, his friendly neighbor facade dissolved instantly into indignant rage. "You have got to be kidding me," he sputtered, his face turning a blotchy red. "You're actually here because of that delivery boy? I'm the victim here. He was trespassing." Linda appeared behind him, clutching her pearls as if on cue. "We're being harassed. I'm going to call our lawyer. This is an outrage." Reyes remained calm, her voice professional and devoid of emotion. "Mr. Masterson, we have a warrant to obtain the video footage from your doorbell camera from yesterday afternoon. You can comply, or we can take the entire unit as evidence, and you can explain to a judge why you were obstructing a police investigation." Miller stood behind her, arms crossed, his presence an unspoken statement of non-negotiable authority. Defeated, Greg huffed and stomped back inside. He returned with a tablet, his fingers jabbing at the screen furiously before handing it over. "Here, see for yourself. It's a whole lot of nothing." Back at the precinct, Reyes sat in a darkened room, Miller beside her. She pressed play. The video was clear, the audio crystal. There was Jamal, polite and professional. There was Greg, escalating immediately. And then there were the words. The camera captured everything. The smug superiority, the casual racism, and then the final, horrific lines. "Get my rope and hang you from that oak tree myself, you fucking nigger." Reyes flinched as if struck. Hearing it was different. Seeing the glee in Greg's eyes as he said it, the approving nod from his wife Lindate turned her stomach. Miller, a man of few words, just shook his head slowly. Jesus Christ. Reyes stared at the screen long after the video ended. She saw Jamal's controlled retreat, the immense strength it took not to react. She saw the Mastersons, smug and safe in their castle of hate. The passive observer in her was dead and buried. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was a duty. She had worn her uniform for 15 years, believing or trying to believe it stood for something. Today, it would. 2 days later, Detective Reyes returned to 1414 Maple Drive. This time, she wasn't alone. 2 marked patrol cars pulled up behind her unmarked sedan, the quiet authority of their arrival rippling through the peaceful afternoon. Neighbors who were washing their cars or tending their gardens suddenly found reasons to pause and watch. The curtain of suburbia was being pulled back. Reyes and Miller walked up the stone path, this time with arrest warrants for Greg and Linda Masterson. Charges: ethnic intimidation and making terroristic threats, both felonies in the state of Ohio. Greg answered the door, and the color drained from his face when he saw not just Reyes, but the uniformed officers behind her. "What is this now?" he demanded, his voice a pathetic squeak. "Mr. Masterson, you and your wife are under arrest," Reyes stated, her voice like ice. The fury returned. "Arrest? For what?" "For exercising my First Amendment rights on my own property." Linda began to wail. "We're the victims. He's the one who should be arrested." It was a pathetic, predictable performance. As the officers moved in to cuff them, Greg began to shout, not at the police, but at his neighbors, who were now openly staring, their phones suddenly out and recording. "Don't you see what's happening? They're coming for us now. This is what they want, to silence us." But his neighbors didn't look sympathetic. They looked horrified. They looked embarrassed. They were seeing the man behind the mask, the ugly truth behind the block party's smiles. An officer cuffed Linda, who collapsed into a fit of performative sobs. Greg, his hands cuffed behind his back, was still yelling as he was led to the squad car. "This is America. I have rights." The irony was lost on him. A neighbor's teenage son, standing on his lawn with his phone held high, captured the entire ignominious scene. The image of the man from the house with the "Love is Love" sign being arrested for a hate crime was just too perfect, too potent to stay local. Before the Mastersons had even been booked, the video was already spreading like wildfire across social media, a stark, satisfying portrait of consequence. The local news channels, tipped off by the viral clip, descended on the neighborhood. The white picket fence was now part of a crime scene. Jamal saw it on the evening news. He was sitting in his apartment, eating a microwaved dinner, when the anchor's voice cut through the quiet. A local couple in the affluent suburb of Oakwood Hills was arrested today in connection with an alleged hate crime. And there it was, the video. Greg Masterson, red-faced and screaming, being forced into a police car. The camera zoomed in on the sign on their lawn. Jamal put his fork down. He didn't feel the surge of victory he thought he would. He didn't feel joy. He just felt quiet. A deep, profound, and aching quiet. The arrests didn't give him back his rank. They didn't undo the major's betrayal. They didn't unwrite his wife's letter. Justice, it turned out, wasn't a cure. It was just a treatment for a single symptom of a sickness that was everywhere. The narrator's voice filled the silence in his head. But this time, it was different. It wasn't a litany of failure. It was a reflection, spoken directly to the world outside his window, to everyone watching. This isn't a happy ending. Don't you dare call it that. This is a receipt for a bill long past due. It's one rotten beam being ripped out of a house that is still standing on a cracked foundation. The real work is not in the tearing down. It's in the rebuilding. A week later, Jamal walked into the Vets Forward Community Center. He'd only ever lurked on their forums, but after his post, the group's organizer had reached out and invited him to a meeting. He was nervous. It was one thing to be a name on a screen. It was another to be a man in a room full of other broken men. He sat in a circle of chairs, and when it was his turn to speak, he stood up. He told his story. All of it. The pride, the fall, the shame, the rage. He spoke of the porch, and the hate, and the feeling of being less than human. When he was finished, a silence fell over the room. Then, an older black veteran, a man who had fought in Vietnam, stood up. "Welcome home, son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. And one by one, others stood with him. A brotherhood, forged not in combat, but in the shared struggle of surviving the peace. The final shot is of Jamal's face. The hardness is still there, but it's not brittle anymore. It's been forged into resolve. He is not just a victim. He is not just a survivor. He is a witness, and his testimony has just begun. The narrator asks one last question, not of Jamal, but of you. What door are you standing in front of right now? What injustice are you turning away from? What will you do when it opens? If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to share it with someone who needs to hear this. Drop a comment to let us know your thoughts and where you're watching from. Your voice matters here, and every story you share helps build a more just, united community.